What if they leave on conscientious issues? Are they still to be treated as described in 1 Corinthians 5:11?
But they've left on conscientious issues.
Correct.
So those would be matters in which they no longer are in agreement with.
Correct.
So then that would be like those that left Jesus when he stated how you would be eating my flesh and my blood. And there were those that immediately stopped following him. And then Jesus said to Peter, well, now you're not going to leave, are you? And Peter said, well, no, Lord, where else will I go, for everlasting life? So, in other words, either one is in agreement with the teachings of Christ and of God, or they're not. And that's why you have all different types of religion. See, I work with a lady who is a traditional Catholic that every Sunday her and her husband drive to Modesto because that's the closest Catholic church that does a traditional Mass.
With the Latin and all that stuff.
Yeah. And she's not at all happy with the current Pope, not at all happy with the current teachings of the Catholic Church, continues to stay with the traditional. But with Jehovah's Witnesses, what you have here in Fresno is what you have over in Australia.
Correct.
It's all the same. So
one cannot necessarily identify themselves as a Jehovah's Witness if they still have contrary teachings to what is the main thought of the organization. I can see what you mean. But yet she can still make a distinction as being a devout Catholic, even though she does not agree with Catholicism as the Roman Catholic Church has set up at this point in time.
that is correct.
So that in that way, witnesses are unified in their beliefs, in their teaching, and they're harmonious in that way.
Correct.
I understand.
Correct.
I totally understand.
It's sort of like with one gentleman that I studied with. He agreed with everything, but he couldn't give up the holidays. He had to have the holidays. He was divorced, and for him, he felt it was the only way in which he could still maintain contact with his children. But come to find out later, he was committing adultery with a sister in the congregation, but that's a whole other story. The point being is that it's 100% devotion, and whether you want to say within the organization or it's all the same. In other words, we view this as God's true organization.
So regardless of what way you back away from it, the ramifications are all going to be the same.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Let's look at Acts 20.
Sure.
20. Let's look at 28. Let's just start at 28.
Sure.
Chapter 28?
Chapter 20, verse 28.
Oh.
Chapter 20, 28. Okay, got it.
20, 28, yes.
Thank you. Alrighty.
Okay, now, Jess, do you want to read that?
Pay attention to yourselves and to all the flock, among which the Holy Spirit has appointed you overseers to shepherd the congregation of God, which he purchased with the blood of his own Son.
And go on, read 29 and 30.
I know that after my going away, oppressive wolves will enter in among you and will not treat the flock with tenderness. And from among you yourselves men will arise and speak twisted things, to draw away the disciples after themselves.
With that in mind, what basically is he saying? Now, he's not talking about bringing fornication, adultery, immorality into the congregation, but what he's
contrary teachings.
And see, the reason why they had to make sure to watch out for this is in verse 29, where it says, "Pay attention to yourselves," meaning the elders in the body, and to the flock, among which Holy Spirit has appointed you overseers, to the shepherd of the congregation of God. And here's the reason why, which he purchased with his own blood of his own Son. So, accountability comes into play as well. If what twisted thoughts is basically twisting what the truth is, what the organization has always taught. So, if ones are allowed to stay in the congregation and those twisted thoughts, that's where they're talking about the oppressive wolves are coming in. It's ones in the congregation that are saying, look, this ain't right. This is where we have to go. This is what we have to do. And if ones are allowed to do that, the
Well,
congregation,
divisions.
one, splits apart,
Correct.
and those that are overseeing the congregation are held accountable for all the blood loss for those ones that, at the end, if they lose their lives on account of allowing this to take place, they're held accountable for it.
Okay.
And so you have to be really cautious, because if you could say things, because cut to the chase, you're asking me these questions and Jerry these questions because someone told you and put doubt in your head,
Mm.
right?
I had questions that actually came up in my own mind that maybe I should have gone to you guys first and
Okay.
you
Now,
know
if-
said
let's
things,
just
but
say
I went out and did my
it's
own
not
independent
us
research.
sitting here,
Uh-huh.
and it's another, say, your sister that might want to be starting to study,
Yeah.
sitting right here, and you're having the same conversation
Conversation
with him.
Yeah.
In her mind, she walks out the door going, "It's enough doubt."
Yeah.
The scriptures say, if alcohol, if me drinking a glass of wine in front of others, his conscience,
Mm-hmm.
I'm held accountable for doing something it's wine, but I sin because of him.
Okay.
Now, regardless whether today has an excellent watchtower is talking about our speech
Mm-hmm.
and how we speech has an effect on others to be uplifting and upbuilding. So if one's just what would differentiate the organization of Jehovah's Witness versus Catholic Baptist? If there was, that's fine. Say whatever you want to everybody. But the problem with Jehovah's Witness organization, once you don't believe, you walk out the door and you're never seen again.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that? Catholics, you mentioned the Catholic, that's cool.
Well, you have one way of thinking, and that is what you are under the assumption is the correct way of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
But it hasn't always been one way of thinking that's been the same since the very beginning. There have been things that have been changed, and there's been new light that's been
Okay.
put in front of us, and we're
Yes.
under the assumption that the slave has always been given direction directly from Jehovah, and so whatever comes forth, we are obligated to see as present truth.
What's
So-
wrong with the Catholic Church? The number one reason the Catholic Church is struggling. They held fast to traditions.
Uh-huh.
They have not changed their viewpoints, even though they have now discovered that those viewpoints are incorrect.
Okay.
And you could read it in the Catholic Bible and their catechism. The Trinity. I don't have the catechism book. My sister-in-law has it. It says blatantly in their book that they teach their children that the Trinity is not based off of the Bible, it's based off of Catholic
What we believe in becomes
tradition.
traditional. Yeah, I've seen that before.
So you take everything that the Pope says and throw it out the window, because what's tradition or truth? If you find you're doing something wrong, I'll tell you what. At work, years ago, we had ones that like to go on the internet while working. They like to go and see these things. So we tell them, you're doing wrong.
You should be working.
Well, I didn't know we weren't supposed to do that. Nope, we're supposed to just keep that. Okay, that was new direction, right?
Okay.
If they kept doing that, they were fired. Why is that? Because now what they assumed was correct is not correct, and they shift this way.
Okay.
It's a refinement. If we continue to hold fast, and there has been revisions, 1914 for one. 1914. They thought they were going to heaven. And you know what? It's kind of interesting. We have a book that anybody could read, and it says 1914, we thought we were going to heaven. Came 1914, what happened? They didn't go to heaven.
Yeah.
But what they do, that was incorrect. So it would be foolish for them to keep saying 1914, we're going to heaven. No, it's 1924. What's wrong with you?
But Kevin, that's not the only date though that they've said that something was going to happen at the end of the system thing was going to happen. That's not even the first date. There's many dates that they said the end was going to come, but never did. Many. And people called us false prophets, and I would always wonder, well, we were only really incorrect about that one day, and the slave, of course, they apologized for it and whatnot. So what's going on? There's been many more dates than that. Like, for instance, the last one was, 1975?